Glad to see you again. I know I've been really late when it comes to making these, but this time I'm not just going to make a singular review here this time. This time I'm going to make a lot of reviews here in just this one video. So I think it's time that after a very long and busy month, I finally give you some of my thoughts on some of the films that came out in the last month and a half. So let's dive into it, shall we? We're already off to a bad start here to this video thanks to this abomination right here. And needless to say, I was not looking forward to this movie. I knew from the trailers alone it was going to be bad. However, what I didn't expect was that it ended up being actually even worse. Everything in this movie, from the acting to the editing, the story, the effects, the music, and even Jared Leto himself, is absolute garbage. Honestly, I will say this. I was constantly debating on just giving this movie its own video to review, but I do not want to give it that much dignity, so no. And here we are now. But I'm still not happy to talk about it. Trailers for this movie constantly hype up Morbius as this epic Marvel legend. He's such a tragic character who blurs the line between villain and hero.
You serious?
The problem with Morbius is not that he's an epic Marvel legend. He's the exact opposite. If anything, he's at most a C-level Spider-Man villain who hasn't really been in anything interesting, and there hasn't really been that much material to make a cool movie about him or even any interesting storylines to pull out of. And as a result, we get this dumpster fire. And because of that, we get this basic generic plot of Morbius suffering from random unspecified disease number 764-3, and it's slowly killing him without showing how it's slowly killing him. Then he gets injected or becomes the subject for this experiment, which gives him superhuman powers. And, he can't control it, so he puts himself in a room full of bats, starts shotgunning blue blood because PG-13 rating, after all, and then has to fight a polar opposite character with the complete same powers, with no motivation, who is far more interesting than the main character, and probably it gives one of the best performances ever, and is at least the only one in this movie who's trying. Now, that being said, Matt Smith is still probably the best part of this movie, but sadly his performance alone does not excuse how horrible this movie is, because this movie is a complete and utter scam. Okay, spoiler alert for those ahead, but who cares here. Even when it does get to that one scene with Vulture that was heavily hyped up for in the trailers, it makes the movie even worse. Originally in the movie, Vulture and Morbius were supposed to have several scenes together when Morbius is in prison at that point in the movie. But instead, they just scrapped that whole deal entirely in order to connect it to the MCU and just put Vulture right into their universe and take him out of the MCU. And it's followed by a meeting scene between the two of them that is a horrible tease for a Sinister Six film. Because we start out the scene with Morbius meeting Vulture for the first time in a whole new wingsuit, somehow in this universe without any of the Jatari tech that powered it in the MCU, And then he goes up to Morbius and he's like, "Hey, Dr. Michael, I don't know how I got here. I think it has to do with Spider-Man, but I think a couple of guys like us should team up, you know what I'm saying?" And Morbius just goes there like, "Okay, sure, why not?" Whereas his real reaction should be, first of all, who are you? How'd you get my number? How do you know my name? 4, who is Spider-Man? This scene makes 0 sense at all. Because not only is it a horrible way to tease a Sinister Six movie, but it's also completely devoid of what has happened in the last 90 minutes of this movie. The Morbius that we meet in this scene is completely different than to who we followed in the last hour and a half. Once again, this movie is a complete and total scam. It is a scam because this is Sony trying to gain and steal money from people because of MCU connections and Spider-Man connections, both of which never appear at all anywhere throughout this movie. All the while, you're forced to endure an hour and a half of generic, horrible plot, horrible, plain, boring acting, horrible action, and not even Matt Smith's entertaining performance can at least hold up this movie. So it's not even worth mentioning or even worth diving further into, because I honestly am not going to give this movie that privilege. 0 out of 10. Let's move on from now.
Sonic, meet Knuckles.
Thank God. Now we're really getting into the good stuff here. Sonic 2 is honestly a great sequel to the first Sonic movie from 2 years ago. And honestly, it's another great video game movie in live action. The sequel immediately picks up right after the events of the first movie and honestly focuses more on Sonic becoming more responsible and maturing, because deep down, despite him being reckless and adventurous, he is still a kid at heart, and he still needs to learn responsibility, which I think really fits well with the introduction of Tails, who's once again voiced amazingly by Colleen O'Shaunghnessey from the video games. Their chemistry really works in this movie, and both of these actors have a lot to really work with these characters, and they genuinely feel like a really great duo and great friends, honestly. Idris Elba is also a great voice for Knuckles, as coming across as someone who is both physically intimidating, but at the same time can be goofy at times when it needs to be comedic. And of course, who can ever say no to Jim Carrey? He is practically Dr. Eggman. While I don't think that this will be his final role as Eggman, I do think, though, that if a good script comes for the third movie, then surely enough he will come out of retirement to play the character once again, because, I mean, hey, who else can play it? But onto the story itself, once again, it really focuses on Sonic really going through a more mature growth as a character, which I honestly like. I like it when movies really take their hero on the whole responsibility issue, whereas they can't just be reckless and constantly be abusing and using their powers for fun. There are actual consequences here, and as I said before, with the introduction of Tails, it puts Sonic in that position to where if something were to happen to him, then this blue hedgehog is just as responsible for this fox getting critically injured or hurt or even dying as much as it is his fault for letting Eggman get away. It really brings out a more mature side to Sonic, and honestly, it's quite a nice journey for the character to go through. If I had to criticize one thing, it would be that the human wedding subplot goes on for a bit longer than it should be. Honestly, I feel like it could have just been easily cut out. Why they decided to keep it in, I have absolutely no idea. But as far as tying it into the games, this movie also is able to perfectly tie in the game's lore by introducing the Chaos Emeralds without being too overcomplicated and being perfect build-up for the chance of a third film. Which, based off the post-credit scene, it does look like we're going to get much more chaos from the Emeralds going forward. But overall, Sonic 2 is another great live-action video game movie, and it's also a great sequel to the first movie. Again, if I had to criticize something, I would say that the wedding subplot throughout this whole movie kind of goes on for longer than it should be. This is a Sonic movie after all, and we've all come here for this blue hedgehog that runs really fast. Overall, very fun, very adventurous, loved it, highly would recommend it. An 8 out of 10. Let's move on to our next movie now, shall we? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once was a movie that I honestly was not really expecting to enjoy. Upon first look at the trailers, it looked so weird and so out of place, but at the same time, I was very intrigued by it and was very interested in it. It's only until after I got home after watching the trailer after coming out of Sonic 2 that I realized that Michelle Yeoh was in this movie alongside Jamie Lee Curtis and Short Round from Indiana Jones 2, which I'm glad to see him in more stuff now. This movie has a very interesting take on the multiverse that honestly Marvel and DC aren't really doing much of, and it kind of does take some inspiration from The Matrix, but at the same time puts its own unique spin and twist on it. But really, when it comes down to this movie's core, it's a very interesting movie with its thesis being on what is the meaning of life. Say the scenario where the main character is going through a divorce, having a falling out with their daughter, and almost being shut down by the IRS. How do you cope with everything, everywhere, all at once, just going straight down to hell? How do you cope with that? How do you make any sense of happiness or meaning out of life? And the movie conveys the answer to this message in a variety of different ways. Because as of right now, we always look towards the bad that lies in the past rather than looking towards the positive in the future. There may sure be possibilities where the opposite does happen in a different universe other than the one that we are in, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that we should take this universe for granted. And instead, we should be more open and be willing to move forward and look more towards the brighter side. And honestly, it's a very nice message in this movie that deals a lot with Jackie Chan martial arts, traveling through multiverses, and all of this other weird stuff going on. It's honestly a well-crafted, well-acted movie, and I highly recommend it. Overall, I would probably give it a 10 out of 10. 2 good movies so far. Let's see what we have next. I think I probably spoke too soon. Let's look at the bright side on this movie before getting into the bad things with this. I'm glad that they got Steve Kloves, who worked on the original live-action Harry Potter movies, to come in as the main writer for this movie and put J.K. Rowling in the back seat and really take control of the story for this movie. This movie has a much more clear plot and clearer stakes, and as a result, it has that solid, firm direction as to where this movie wants to go, unlike with The Crimes of Grindelwald. This movie presents itself more as a fantasy political thriller, which is honestly pretty interesting. And I'm also glad to see that a Fantastic Beast is actually one of the main plot points and crucial details about this movie. I also think that Mads Mikkelsen does do a great job as Grindelwald. I'm especially glad that he didn't just try to copy Johnny Depp's performance and actually created his own performance with the character and came off more as someone very charismatic, someone that you could believe in, someone who could easily get a bunch of followers to join his cause. However, that's probably about where my pros for this movie go. Because we are currently 3 movies into this spin-off franchise, and it feels like it still doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't know if it wants to be this whimsical adventure of this magic zoologist going around the world and finding all of these magical, fantastic beasts and creatures in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, or if it wants to be about the complicated relationship between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. These 2 directions constantly are fighting each other for the main base and direction for this franchise, and it's still not clear which one it wants to follow. And as a result, it kind of hinders on the tone a little bit, because it doesn't know if it wants to be fun and whimsical and adventurous, but at the same time, it doesn't know if it wants to be serious and more darker and more about the complex relationship that these 2 characters have with each other. I also feel like Jacob Kowalski and Credence are both very underutilized in this movie. These 2 characters have been with us for the previous 2 movies now, and I feel like they should have a stronger motive for why they want to be here. Why does Jacob want to still get involved with this wizard race war despite being a muggle, other than the fact that he and Newt are friends? Why is Credence still here following Grindelwald, other than the fact that he ends up having a fight with Dumbledore halfway through the movie and then just hangs around for the rest of the runtime? These 2 characters have been with us for a while now, and I feel like they should have a stronger motive and reason for why they are here and involved. But with that being said, I don't think that The Secrets of Dumbledore is a completely bad film. This movie is definitely an improvement over The Crimes of Grindelwald, but at the same time, this movie isn't great. I ultimately feel like a major problem is that, again, 3 movies in, this franchise still has no solid, firm direction as to whether it wants to be serious or if it wants to be more whimsical. And at the same time, I feel like some of the characters in this movie are just kind of there and don't really get a whole lot much to do. And honestly, seeing as how well that this movie performed, I doubt that we're going to be getting those 2 other Fantastic Beasts movies going forward. But with that being said, I'm going to give The Secrets of Dumbledore a 6 out of 10. Not a bad film, but at the same time, not a great film. This movie is just okay. But let's see what we have next, shall we? Now, I've been a big fan of DreamWorks' animated movies for a long time now. In fact, some of my favorite animated movies are DreamWorks movies. So, when I saw the trailer for this, and seeing as how it was finally a break from Boss Baby, I was honestly really looking forward to this. The animation looked so unique and crisp and fresh, and I honestly couldn't wait to see it. And not only that, but it also had Sam Rockwell in a lead main voice role, which I was honestly pretty excited for as well. And then I ultimately sat down and saw it, and honestly, I'm really impressed with this movie. Now, hands down, the most notable thing about this movie is the animation. It perfectly combines that Saturday morning Looney Tunes 2D animation cartoony look with the modern 3D animation that we're all accustomed to, while at the same time being very smooth and crisp and vibrant, while at the same time being highly reminiscent of other heist and crime capers like Lupin III, the Ocean's movies, and more. Redemption arc stories have been done previous times in the past, so it's really not anything new. However, this movie does handle it very well with these characters, in the sense that can they really be worth redeeming? Can they truly break away from being the big bad wolf and the shark, the dangerous tarantula and snake and etc., and actually be good? It's a nice little message that works for this movie, while at the same time being this fun and entertaining ride that both kids and adults will get a like out of, and it's led by a great voice cast by Sam Rockwell as Mr. Wolf. I really enjoyed this movie with its fun and entertaining tone, its hands down beautiful animation, and also its nice story and theme to really make this movie worth the watch. So I would probably give The Bad Guys an 8 out of 10. Alright, what do we have next here? This movie is epic as fuck! While I have not seen Egger's previous works, I was still really looking forward to this movie for his direction to see how he would handle a movie outside of the horror genre. And needless to say, I was not disappointed at all. This movie has probably one of the best and strongest first acts that I've seen so far, as it not only kicks off the plot forward, but we also get to see just how interesting yet brutal Vikings really were in history. I especially loved the whole scene where it's Amleth going around the whole village that the Berserkers are pillaging, and it's full of brutal action while done in this epic, long, continuous shot. It's probably one of the best scenes throughout this whole movie thanks to the cinematography, which adds more to the brutal tone and direction that this movie is going for, while at the same time being absolutely gorgeous as well, particularly with the final battle where it looks like the two characters are literally having a sword fight in the pits of hell. I also really like the whole trippy and supernatural scenes with Willem Dafoe where the main characters are acting like wolves, and the scene with Bjork reminding Amleth of his destiny and this vow that he made years ago. It plays with that theme of destiny in a very interesting way, in that it is impossible to escape it and you are always bound to fulfill it, which leads towards that amazing final battle. Alexander Skarsgård and Anya Taylor-Joy are great throughout this whole movie, where Skarsgård is this revenge and rage-driven warrior prince, whereas Anya is the polar opposite and is a calm, strategic sorceress, and it's interesting to see these two characters interact with each other throughout the whole movie. Furthermore, the performances throughout the entire rest of the cast, like Nicole Kidman, Bjork, Willem Dafoe, and Ethan Hawke, are all great as well, and highly worth mentioning in this movie too. Overall, this is an epic, amazing, action-filled Viking movie that is probably one of the best depictions of Viking culture to this day. So, I'm gonna give The Northman a 10 out of 10. And that's about it. Though, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't put my finger on it. Cam, who are you? I'm you, but from a different universe. What do you mean you're from a different universe? One out of many in the infinite multiverse. Wait, if you're from a different universe, how did you get here? Honestly, I don't know, but I guess you could say that it's quite strange, really. Oh my god, it really is going into madness. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is probably one of the best MCU movies that is out right now. And a big part of that is definitely thanks to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Sam Raimi. After the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange comes into contact with a girl named America Chavez who has the ability to travel throughout the multiverse and is being hunted by several unknown monsters. So he decides to enlist the help of Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch. Now, while I was disappointed to hear that the original director Scott Derrickson ended up dropping out of this movie due to creative differences, I immediately got hyped back up again for this movie when it was announced that Sam Raimi was going to be directing it, because he knows how to execute what they want for this movie. He knows how to make a good superhero movie thanks to his work on the original Spider-Man trilogy, and he also knows how to work well with horror thanks to his work on The Evil Dead. This movie is very much a Raimi movie, and you can tell after watching several of his previous works, from the dialogue and the script to the way the camera moves to several of the scares and the scenes that are highly reminiscent of The Evil Dead, that totally and completely work in this movie. While at the same time, it perfectly shows how to do superhero horror correctly, which I think is a very interesting combination. However, most movies that do tackle it don't really seem to get it right. However, this gives me hope on how to properly execute that combination for the future. But getting back to the movie, I like how it really dives into Strange as a character. We've always seen and come to know Strange as this arrogant and reckless individual who always puts his interests in before others, and as a result, that can often lead to a rift between him and his friends and his alliances. It's a very interesting look at the character, and it provides some really great character growth for him throughout the whole movie. I also really liked Xochitl Gomez as America Chavez, and I think that her performance in this movie was pretty good. However, I felt like her character was kind of a waste, as she ended up being more of a plot device to get the movie going forward, rather than being developed further and further as a character until it comes to the third act. Plus, this movie also sees the return of Danny Elfman once again composing the score after working with Raimi on the original Spider-Man trilogy. This is probably one of my favorite soundtrack lists for an MCU movie so far, as the soundtrack is both eerie, epic, and creepy at the same time. Okay, spoilers are ahead right here at this point, so if you haven't seen the movie already, go ahead and click away from this part of the video and come back once you have. Alright, here we go. I really like how they establish that Wanda is the villain immediately in the first act. And it also showcases just how far she's tragically come as a character. Because as of this moment, she has lost pretty much everything that she cares about. She's lost her family, she's lost her brother, she's lost her husband, and after WandaVision, she has lost her kids. And after coming into possession of this book of evil and dark magic, she is completely gone off the rails and is obsessed, hyper obsessed with gaining a family, that she is willing to go to a different universe and abduct those kids and be their mother and do God knows what with that universe's version of Wanda. She may have started out as a hero and as an Avenger in the beginning when she was introduced, but she has come so far down, so far in her story in the MCU, that she is a complete and total villain in this case. And honestly, she is probably one of the most menacing and terrifying villains ever in the MCU. She's completely obsessed with gaining a family that she shuts out from anyone else's opinion and only listens to herself. Now, getting into other stuff in this movie, I feel like the Illuminati were a nice touch, and it was cool to see them, but I feel like they were kinda wasted. They really don't get much to do other than just be there. And not only that, but the fact that we also got hints of them in the little ads and the promos and the trailers also kind of downed the hype for them. I will say this, that it was awesome seeing Haley Atwell come back as the live-action Captain Carter and Anson Mount as Black Bolt, but I honestly feel like they were just there to beef up the body count, in which they get killed pretty brutally for a PG-13 movie. However, that's not to say that the Illuminati was not disappointing. After all, it was amazing to see my man, my boy, Chucky Professor X, once again in live action, played again by Sir Patrick Stewart, and this time in the complete, total 90s X-Men cartoon getup with the suit, tie, and the giant yellow hover wheelchair. But probably even more powerful than that was finally seeing John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards himself. Now, even though his cameo was short, this does give me hope that we might still be able to see him in the main MCU 616 universe as our official Reed Richards Mr. Fantastic, alongside Emily Blunt as Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman. But getting into the horror of this movie, I love how a lot of this is very reminiscent of Evil Dead that works perfectly with Doctor Strange, such as having a book with the souls of the damned, the undead, necromancy, and etc. I love all of these sequences, especially in the first act at Carmitage, as they are probably some of the most chilling and scary scenes throughout this whole movie. And I love that we really got to dip our toes into horror with this movie without being way too scary or over the top, because this movie really pushes the limits of that PG-13 rating, and I love it for that. However, if I were to nitpick on one thing, it would be that I wish we had gotten some more of the multiverse. We pretty much spend most of the whole movie in the main 616 universe, as well as in the universe with the Illuminati, and it feels kind of disappointing and underwhelming in a movie titled The Multiverse of Madness. I feel like we could have gotten some more creativity when it came to that, especially with the scene where Strange travels with America Chavez through multiple different universes in the Paint universe, and it feels kind of disappointing to have the movie be mainly based in these two universes. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie a lot. I enjoyed the darker and scarier tone, the performances from Benedict Cumberbatch, Elizabeth Olsen, and Xochitl Gomez, and I also liked this movie's look at Strange as a character, which creates some really nice and great character growth all the way throughout the whole movie. So overall, I'm going to give Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness a 9 out of 10. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Sorry I've been busy a whole lot, so I've been lacking when it comes to videos, and I'm especially going to be busy coming this summer, but I'm going to try and get content out sooner. But hope you guys enjoyed this. This was longer than my usual videos, so hope you all enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.